Canada's live music economy has been hit hard by this year's pandemic. And with our city's abundance of independent live music venues, Kingston is certainly no exception. They play a vital cultural role in our community. They play an economic role by drawing residents and visitors downtown. They're a source of income for the many local artists who play them, not to mention the promoters. And they help employ hundreds of others, from bar and wait staff to sound engineers and even cleaners. But for months now, health and safety regulations have prohibited music performances to a live audience of any size. While regulations are loosening as our province enters Stage 3 of the COVID-19 recovery plan, it doesn't change the fact that our city's live music venues were the first businesses to close, and they'll be the last ones to open. And having gone without the revenue from live music for so long, the very survival of many of these venues is threatened. Without urgent action, a significant part of Kingston's and Canada's musical economy could be wiped out, and it could take decades to rebuild. Today we're joined by Erin Benjamin, president of the Canadian Live Music Association. We're also joined by Andrew Brown, manager of the Toucan, and Kris Clendining, owner of the beloved Musiikki Café.
Hey everyone, welcome to our 20th episode. I'm Kingston Live executive producer Rob Howard. I am not usually the familiar voice that you're hearing. That voice belongs to our production lead here, Johnny San. He's taken the day off. Actually, he's not off at all. He's just here behind the wall, monitoring all the sound levels and doing his magic. I'm joined today by one of our other interviews who've joined us in past episodes, Pete Sanfilippo.
Yeah, I'm not always here, but right now I'm maintaining the 50% Sanfilippo average that we've been keeping up throughout the podcast.
Right on. I think the last time you and I were on an episode might have been our year-end roundup for 2019 back in December, certainly before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And as particularly, we're talking today about just the impact that it's had on Canada's live music economy, and specifically the impact it's had on Kingston's. We enjoy such an amazing and diverse and normally healthy and thriving live music scene here in Kingston, with the abundance of live music venues that we have. And I'm feeling it. I'm feeling anxious that I have not been able to go and take in live music. I mean, the live streams have been fantastic, and I participate in those whenever I can and tune into those whenever I can. Lots of great talent and lots of great performances to take in, but it's, it just leaves me wanting more, wanting that live music experience. And I don't know if you're feeling the same.
I think everyone that is a consumer of live music and a consumer of really any music we all have kind of a similar sentiment right now of, it's weird that at the beginning of the year, we're like, this is the festival that I'm most excited about, but I'm also going to these three, and these are the shows that I'm stoked for. And like, these people are releasing these albums, and just this hit and just completely derailed all that.
I think it really sucks, especially for some of Kingston's bands and artists. I know the Glorious Sons were on a tour. I think that got canceled. They just won a Juno, and it seems so anticlimactic. It's almost like, well, we can't celebrate even with a live show. Sarah Harmer just put out an album and had planned a tour. Oak Ridge Ave put out a great album, which they were planning to support with a tour, and all that's gone. And I can't imagine. The impact on the venues is one thing, but the impact on the artists who play those venues is something else.
Also, even like all the YGK Emerging Artists winners from last year, like this was going to be a big opportunity to, take advantage of that
the momentum.
There we go. But yeah, we're just gonna have to see, what comes of that. Like maybe we'll get some recordings, maybe we'll People will just have to wait. But it's such a weird, frustrating thing to see.
My favorite part of the summer is looking forward to, almost on a weekly basis here in Kingston, the music festivals that are largely outdoors here. Everything from the Wolf Island Music Festival that happens in the west on Wolf Island, the east on Wolf Island, to the McKinnon Brothers Back to the Farm Festival that happens later in the summer in the West End. And it's unfortunate because those are always the highlights of my summer. Whenever I'm talking to people in the fall, it's, how was your summer? And it was great. I went to, this festival and that festival, and I saw these bands, and it was awesome. And, I never am left wanting for live music, being a resident of Kingston and having, so many live music festivals and great acts coming through here as part of those festivals in the summertime.
And we've been definitely very privileged in never having to have a lack of performances happening. If you want to hear some music, you can just go pretty much anywhere downtown, and there's somewhere, someone great is playing somewhere pretty much any night. So it's such a strange thing to see that element of the local culture be uprooted. We're all just waiting.
I hope you and I, Pete, get to host some more podcast episodes soon. I feel like 6 or 7 months now has been too long, because we could probably talk music all day. But we want to approach our podcast episodes with the mindset of not necessarily having a static cast of interviewers in mind, but more like a rotating stable of interviewers, and maybe even having some guest interviewers on from time to time from Kingston's live music scene and live music economy here to represent a different voice and ask different questions and share different perspective through some of the interviews that we do here. So, but at the very least, I hope we're on again soon. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. We're speaking with the president of the Canadian Live Music Association, Erin Benjamin, as well as two live music venue operators, Andrew Brown from the Toucan pub, the legendary Toucan. Many bands claim to have got their start there. And they've been around for many, many years, a real cornerstone and pillar of Kingston's live music scene. And also Kris Clendining from Musiikki Café. And while they're not as old as the Toucan pub, they have in a few short years become a really important part of Kingston's live music scene. I know it's a favorite venue of mine and many, many others who love to take in live music, but also a favorite of musicians, many of whom play there on a regular basis. And so really looking forward to the conversation about the impact of the pandemic and what stage 3 recovery and beyond is going to look like for them as we kind of head towards reopening the province for business. Erin, I wanted to start with you. You're originally from Toronto. You now call Ottawa home, our capital city. Being Canada's original capital, but now a mid-sized city that punches way above its weight musically, we like to call Kingston Canada's first capital of music. But let's start with the macro view. What's the situation across Canada that many live music venues find themselves facing in the midst of COVID-19, including the many venues here in Kingston?
Oh, well, it's catastrophic. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything during this. I've spent a career in this business, and I'm always talking about putting a positive spin on things. But it's just not possible right now. So I'm not going to. It's catastrophic. It's devastating. And as you said in the intro, we're potentially looking at decades of recovery, generations of people working in the music industry, from artists to sound techs to venue owners and managers, promoters. If there are any left standing at the end of this, the live music industry in this country could look potentially extremely different. I think there are silver linings, and we can maybe unpack some of those as we go through today. But generally, there's no one city or region that's been spared. I mean, I guess that's a silver lining. We're all in this together, which is normally a good thing. But from Halifax to Iqaluit to Yellowknife and Calgary and Saskatoon, I know I'm routing a really bad tour right there. But at the very basic level, the new normal has to be earning revenue and work for artists. So revenue for venues, selling tickets, selling food and beverage, whatever that is, and being able to run these, hundreds and hundreds of small businesses across the country.
As the president of the Canadian Live Music Association, what kind of stories have you been hearing from some of your members who represent some of Canada's independent live music venues across the country?
Well, I mean, they range, right? There are a lot of people really inspired by the potential for innovation and pivoting. And then there are those who are terrified they're not going to be able to feed their kids. And I tell you, I'm on the front line of this, and I get very emotional when I talk about this because it's just so hard to imagine what some people are going through. And I hear all kinds of stories, and people are frustrated, but there is one consistent thing. I think people in the live music industry really recognize the role and responsibility, the role we play, the responsibility we have to keep people safe, especially artists and our workers and of course our fans. So there are a lot of people anxious to get back to it, but they want to do it right, because I think the stakes are so incredibly high. If we're to reopen, as we're looking at in Ottawa and some parts, most of Ontario now is stage 3, and we're seeing other provinces already there. If there was to be any kind of significant outbreak or situation at a live music venue, it would put us back as an industry right across the country. I'm convinced of this. If there was a flare up somewhere in BC, it will affect all of us. And I'm just picking on BC. It could be anywhere. It will be really, really bad for business. Take all of this together and, you've got venues from across the country just trying to figure it out. Do they innovate? Do they pivot? Do they shutter? Do they close? Do they wait it out? I mean, it's still day by day, which is what a long road to hear. And I believe this is only one baby step on this very long journey.
Organizations like Canadian Live Music Association that you represent and the Canadian Independent Venues Coalition has really picked up the torch on behalf of independent venues to make their case known and known to government officials and others who are in positions to provide support. Some Kingstonians and Canadians may be listening, though, and thinking, live music is the least of our worries, or feeling like it's less important to our economic recovery than other sectors. Why should Canadians be paying closer attention to the situation impacting our country's music venues? Just how important is the economic impact of live music to communities and cities like Kingston, or to Canada as a whole?
Such a great and important question. And in fact, it's part of the reason why this association that I run was created 5.5 years ago, was to entrench the economic, social, and cultural value and power of live music for people, because, we haven't done a great job as an industry to really tell our story either to government or to the public. So we have that opportunity now, and there's a lot of irony in what's happening. But in terms of why this industry is important, so every city and town in this country has a local live music economy. And when you unpack that economy and you start to recognize both the direct and indirect economic impact. So when I go to the Toucan, for example, for a show, maybe I'm having dinner down the street, maybe I'm parking, or I've taken an Uber or taxi, or maybe I've come to town and I'm staying at a hotel. Maybe I took the train in, I'm buying, whatever I need to I'm there as a tourist. Or maybe I'm at a show in my own backyard in Ottawa, but there's all kinds of ancillary spending, direct and indirect benefits to the small businesses around that experience, that not everyone is thinking about. And as a matter of fact, the live music industry in this country creates 72,000 jobs from coast to coast to coast, and has a contribution to GDP of approximately, or an estimated, $3 billion. We are as a standalone industry, we're large, and in some provinces we're bigger than film and television. We're bigger than a lot of industries, in fact, depending on where you're looking. But more importantly, so you've got the economic piece, you've got the social piece. We're social creatures. Gathering is what we do. This is why it's been so inconceivable to actually get our heads around, at least for me, what's been happening. I mean, it's just so hard to think about how long-term this may be in terms of being able to sit with our friends and see a large concert.
Some of the numbers, Erin, that you just I think Canadians should pay attention to. I'm actually shocked and surprised at those numbers in terms of the economic impact of Canada's music economy. Andrew, a question for you. The Toucan, as the manager of the Toucan, you must feel you're contributing in that way economically to Kingston. The Toucan itself has been a cornerstone of Kingston's live music scene for many years. And, many bands and artists claim to have even got their start there. I think, Erin, you've actually played there, it sounds like. But it's actually hard to imagine Kingston without the Toucan. Just how much does the pub rely on live music, and how difficult has not being able to host live music events made things for you?
Well, we're half a restaurant as well, so we're not as totally 100% reliant on live music. So not compared to some places where it's just a sole venue. We have income coming in, whatever they're giving us now for the patio. But live music was a big part of what we did. We had 3 for sure nights a week of live music, sometimes 4 nights, and then we'd have a DJ the other nights. And there's always something going on. And we certainly feel we're contributing to the downtown vibe. And as Erin mentioned, bringing people down and how it's trickled down through all sorts of economies. We don't know where it's going to go, though. We want to bring it back as soon as we can and as safely as we can. But it's going to be so tough to what it was for that way.
Kris, by contrast, Musiikki Café hasn't been around as long as the Toucan, but in just a few short years, I think Musiikki has become arguably one of the favorite venues here in Kingston amongst local music lovers and musicians for live music. Seeing as music is practically baked into your name, how have you felt the impact of not being able to host live music?
It's been incredibly different, from the start of the pandemic and everything changing. We are built around, like you were saying, live music. So, we do it every night of the week. We do live bands. People come mostly for this. In fact, we went into this business as more of a live music venue, above being even a bar. But of course, the bar aspect kind of keeps the venue doors open as far as making an income there. But we also kind of support all these different bands that come through every night, and we're often relying on that. So it's been quite the change now that's done. We've had a lot of bands that we've been talking to that they're suffering, just without being able to do their regular shows in between Musiikki and other places. And then of course, we've had to completely change what we've been doing every day. And in fact, we stayed closed for a long time, and we're just starting to open up on the weekends and explore other options to try to get bands, paid and playing, and hopefully get public to be able to feel comfortable to come out and enjoy it in one form or another. But it's a struggle to try to, it's reinventing, the wheel in a sense, and who knows how long it's going to last for. And people, I think, are questioning, is it worth it to go through all the effort to try to reinvent the wheel here? And it seems like we have no choice to at least try.
And it's interesting that you've been talking to artists as well. There's many artists play Musiikki quite regularly, and I think there's a handful of them that will maybe even play there weekly. I would imagine that it had become a reliable source of income for those artists and those bands. What are some of the things that they're telling you, and what are some of the things that you're hearing from those bands and artists as you continue conversations with them?
Well, at first, everyone was nervous, with what was going on with the COVID-19. Of course, everyone was nervous to be exposed. So the thought of even kind of we dabbled around with doing some live streams and things, and I know I've seen some from Toucan as well. We had troubles with our internet, and it was difficult to go that route, but we did try that. But people then were a lot of the bands, regular bands that come to Musiikki, were still nervous at the time to even do that. But as of lately, over the last I'd say a couple weeks to a month, talking to some of the bands that come out regularly to Musiikki, everyone seems quite eager at this point to get back into the scene and get back playing again. If not for the income, just this is what they do. You kind of you lose steam, without being able to do your thing, without being able to perform. So I think people at this point are just ready to play. They however we can figure out how to do it, they're ready and waiting.
I got a question for Erin. Erin, this is very interesting to hear the perspective of some of Kingston's live music venues. I know that the Canadian Independent Venue Coalition started a campaign under the hashtag Support Canadian Venues, and it sparked a lot of advocacy coast to coast by Canadian artists, from Broken Social Scene and Dan Mangan to our own Tragically Hip here in Kingston. Has this campaign helped lead to the recent pledge by the national government of $20 million towards supporting Canada's live music sector?
That $20 million had been committed before the coalition was created. I think what the coalition has helped to do is to really raise public awareness. And I think it's a very public-facing campaign. I think the government is, well aware of the plight, and their preoccupation is with, so many small businesses. And not just venues. I mean, I wanted to make sure that I talked about the ecology too, because whenever we say venues, and of course we mean artists, we also mean managers, agents, road managers, crew, front of house, depending on the size of the venue, volunteers, box office, the entire world that makes up the live music industry, tech, you name it. And so what's really important through, raising awareness of the venues are a great opportunity because there's so many of them are so fundamental, like the Toucan, not only to their city, but to their neighborhood. They create reasons for people to not just come downtown, but probably live downtown. And to put a city like Kingston on the map. I mean, we've got the Black Sheep in Wakefield, Quebec, 15 minutes north of Ottawa. I mean, the Black Sheep is one of the, like the Toucan, one of the most important listing rooms in the country, like a place where you discover music that could be around forever. I mean, it's just such an important building block to an artist's career. And to shine a spotlight on the venues is to really expose the broader industry and help the public understand. Because again, I think as we move to the stage 3 thing, a lot of people stop me on the street in my neighborhood and they're like, "Oh, you must be so happy to be getting back to work," and they mean well. But I just think there's a general disconnect, and the live music industry is complex, and it's it's a very cash-based business. It was already in some cases, not all venues, but some live on the thin edge of the wedge at the best of times. And that was something we were working on. That's part of the reason that we exist at the Canadian Live Music Association, again, is to really build capacity in the sector and identify ways to fortify that capacity and grow it. And I can tell you the live music industry in Canada and globally was poised to have its best year on record. It was going to be a blockbuster year, not just at outdoor festivals, but indoors as well. So, the role the venues play and all of the advocacy work, I think, has given us a great opportunity to help governments and others understand why we matter.
And given the size and the impact that the live music economy has, why do you think it's taken to July 7th, I think, to get that $20 million delegated?
Okay, so Canadian Heritage announced the $500 million sustainability fund or emergency relief fund, and there was a broad group of diverse stakeholders from community sports organizations to cultural industries. And you unpack that and it goes forever, but they were basically working to support their existing clientele. So phase 1 went to people who already had a relationship with the Department of Canadian Heritage, Factor, Musique Action, Canada Council. So, because that was easy. It was relatively easy. We know these people, they came up with a formula, which was 25% of their prior allocation, whether it was a project grant or core funding or whatever you got. If you got $100 from Canadian Heritage in the past, you automatically got $25, and that was yours to go to your bottom line. Here in phase 2, and we're in the throes of this right now. So phase 2 was launched 2 weeks ago. It's proving to be problematic, the eligibility criteria, but we're working through it, meant to catch the rest of, and we'll focus exclusively on live music, although there are other subsectors in various, again, sports, cultural industries who will be receiving some money. But $20 million coming to live music. But they had to figure out who and how and when and what for, and because they don't know this community. And I can't help but take the opportunity here to say, because again, Canadian Live Music Association was created in part to help government understand who we are. And I've had a very long, almost 6-year conversation with the federal government around the importance of the live music sector. And those have been difficult conversations. And there was a point where I had said many years ago, if anything bad was to happen to the live music industry, the rest of the industry would be in trouble. And that comment was met with a sort of a bit of a guffaw and like, oh, come on, Erin, like, as if. And with all, like, the government's working very hard. I really want to make this clear. As frustrating as it's been for us, the Heritage and the federal government in general, I think are doing an excellent job of trying to figure out an unprecedented situation. It's not easy. So the 20 million gets announced, have to figure out how to dole it out, and they don't have a relationship with any of the people who are going to get it. So they don't know, what's it going to cost. I mean, I've been we were very grateful for 20 million, and I've called it a good start. It's a step down a very long road. Other countries, as we've seen, the UK, Australia, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, have committed much more to live performance. But I do feel cautiously optimistic that we're going to get through this whole phase 1, phase 2 thing, and then sort of continue to figure out what's necessary. I mean, there's simply, if the federal relief measures are part of the solution, but if we're talking about shuttering an entire industry with zero revenue, this is a distinction that has to be constantly made, because, sure, there are venues that can sell food, or maybe they can, sell a bottle of wine out of there, or what do takeout. It's all fine. But ultimately, as I said earlier, the math doesn't work. And so if we're looking at a year from now, or hopefully less, we need a plan, because this is a live music industry that will come back and help this country's economy rebuild and recover. We have a role to play. We're anxious to play it. We want to be intact. We want to be able to hit the ground running. But without support, we'll be a shadow of our former selves. And this country may need us. And we want to be here.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the importance of having that plan. Now, where does that plan come from? Who's responsible for creating that? Is that something that would be created by the government that we're just waiting for them to pass down, or is that something that would be done in collaboration with many different stakeholders across the country?
It's I can tell you from day one of this pandemic, we've been putting recommendations and plans in front of the government on a weekly basis. Your eyes would roll back in your head if you saw my files on this. I mean, it's endless, and we've been tweaking and massaging, finessing, like, okay, that we think this will work. Here's what Australia is doing and why. Here's how we can apply this here. Endless recommendations, and the government's open to that to a certain extent. I mean, they are dealing with everybody, right? And so, we have to wait sometimes, and that's okay. Fully understand that. And we always appreciate the effort and energy they put into conversations with us to try and help and sort of plan for the long term. But the onus is on industry. It's why it's so important that we are working together as an industry right now, because I've said this many times, that this is definitely one of the silver linings. Like, my job has been to build and grow this organization. We've had more new members in the last 4 months than we've had last year. It's because awareness, like light bulbs go off, like, oh, we have a voice. We have a voice in Ottawa, and it's good. I mean, we're a pretty young organization, and it's hard in the live music industry. We're very proprietary, territorial, competitive entrepreneurs. We don't always play well together. We don't want to play well together. It's like we fight for our space, and we like to keep it that way. We've never needed really to work together like this before. And I believe we're getting more and more united every day. There's no question about that. And that is essential in telling our story to government and moving this forward in a really productive, positive way that saves as many of us as possible.
Agreed. Kris, a question for you. How do you feel about, hopefully the things that Erin are saying are music to your ears, pardon the pun. But, with funding and support becoming available, how do you feel about the recent announcement by Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault of the program that lets owners of for-profit venues like Musiikki apply for funding?
I think kind of a common misconception is that, I know in our case anyways, I'm not sure about other venues, it's not really... It's not like the venue is profiting all kinds of money from any given artist that's playing there. It's usually, and again, in our case, I'm not sure about all venues, but we're kind of supporting the artists as much as, it goes both ways. But so it actually costs money in the long run for us to be doing this and keeping it consecutive and every day, that kind of way. So it is costly. And one thing, as far as funding goes, I I think that would be good, but I'm worried that I think a lot of places are going to be forced to focus on some of the other, like in our situation, focus on, say, the bar revenue as opposed to, putting any money in towards this live music, which, we still will continue to do because that is what the bar is, or what Musiikki is. But I have a feeling it's going to be difficult for some places, or for all places, to be kind of putting this extra cost and effort into doing the support and dedicating time into this. So I think that ultimately a lot of the people who are coming to enjoy the music, or even enjoying it from a distance, whether it's streaming or anything, but if they're coming to enjoy it, we have to kind of pool together as well as any kind of government funding we can get. But if people can kind of think a little differently on it when they go out to see music, just to consider the fact that it needs to cost something. People think that it's all free, and sometimes people don't think about it too much, but I think now more than ever, people coming to enjoy the music need to think about the fact that, they might have to be paying for something in order to do this and to contribute.
Andrew, what's your perspective on this? Is the relief that is being offered up and that is becoming accessible to venues like the Toucan of any relief to you at all?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if we're going to be eligible, as I say, because we're half a restaurant, right? We're not a sole venue. I'm not sure if that's meant for us, but any help we get, what we're going to face is, with our model at the Toucan, is how we're going to pay the bands, even when we're open. We rely on the bar sales to create some cash, so we just started paying the bands many years ago. We stopped having someone at the door, but we did that because we could rely on bar sales, but we're not going to have that volume anymore. So looking ahead to when we are able to open and get people in, we're not going to have that volume. So any help from the government to be able to pay the bands, we still have a venue, but we want to get some money to the bands. Ultimately, it's going to be difficult.
So you're saying that there's an impact on your very business model around live music, whereas I think one of the great things about the Toucan is it's been well known that you don't charge cover for the live music, and you pay the bands, I guess, instead, as you were explaining here, through a portion of the revenues generated by the bar sales. And so you're saying that you're maybe faced with a difficult decision to change that model.
Well, we'll be able to have bands, but we won't be able to certainly give them any of the money they used to get. That's the issue. So it's going to have to be a combination of money through live streaming and the application, the tip jar application, maybe through that, and we might have to go back to charging the door, which is hard to do at the pub. So there's many options available, but it won't be the same as before for a long time. I can see that, unfortunately.
Since both Toucan and Musiikki are so well connected in the Kingston music scene, have you been approached by any bands or artists in town with ideas for collaboration given the circumstances?
Well, just the live streaming stuff. They all want to do that still, and it was a shame that they shut that down. As I mentioned earlier, the local government shut it down, and they didn't even inspect it. They would have seen it was quite safe.
Andrew, while we're on that point, can you just explain the situation that transpired there as you were attempting to do a live streaming show safely in your own venue?
Well, we finally got it up and running, and all the technical details worked out, but we were able to live stream, and it was quite popular with our hundreds of Facebook fans of the Toucan. And all of a sudden, we got a call from the local health board just stopping it. And I inquired. I didn't talk to the person from the health board, but they hadn't actually visited or seen what we were doing. They just assumed it was unsafe without actually seeing it, and that was a frustrating part. I wish if they saw it, they could see it was quite safe. And again, we're doing whatever we can to try and help the bands out.
There are lots of examples of that happening in other places too, and I'd be happy to connect with you after this, Andrew, because it's not every city is sending in the social distancing police, but they really do need to explain to you exactly what their issues were so you can respond to them for the next time.
We want to be as safe as anyone, we don't want to be that place. We're the most important.
Hey, you want to get it right.
If our staff aren't safe and healthy, then the whole thing's shut down. So of course we're going to be very, very safe in what we're doing.
Erin, it's interesting that you brought that up. I'm wondering if we only hear what we hear. Venue owners like Andrew and Kris, very busy. They can't pay attention to everything. But what other programs or resources might be available to for-profit venues like Musiikki or festivals and the like that are also haven't been able to generate revenue through live music performances that they may not know about, that they might want to be investigating? Are there other sources out there that they should be looking into?
Yeah, for sure. I want to say that even if you don't think you're eligible for support, and it's not funding, it is emergency relief money through the Canadian Heritage 20 million, just apply. See if you can get yourself through the eligibility criteria. Just apply. We're actually encouraging everyone to apply as we work in the background to finesse what we hope will be some changes to loosen restrictions around the eligibility, because they're not working for everybody, and we really hope that Heritage will be open to some of that. So if you feel like you can, just do. And that's a message for everybody or anyone listening who feels like that, who is a live music stakeholder, who feels like they might be captured in the list of stakeholders. And then, so there's a whole bunch of things that are happening behind the scenes. I'm the co-chair of something called the Ontario Music Panel, which is working with Minister Lisa MacLeod, who's the culture minister in the province. We made a report with a suite of recommendations submitted a couple of weeks ago to the Standing Committee on Finance in the province to sort of outline some things, measures that we think would be beneficial. We're looking at all kinds of things with different groups, including venues, around how can we get, the insurance piece is huge, right? All the overhead costs that venues are continuing to pay, it's astronomical in some cases. So how can we work with provinces? Where do we see opportunities that are potentially cost neutral for a province, but they can help us leverage a different kind of conversation? That would be helpful. And then we're certainly working, as I indicated, long term with the federal government and the provinces to sort of build some sort of, whether it's a bailout or sustainability programming package that will respond to the needs of this entire industry. So it's early days. It still feels like I'm on my way to the airport to get to the Junos, frankly. Every day is Groundhog Day for many of us, but things will happen slowly but surely. I think that this country, there are a lot of powers that be that recognize the critical importance of the industry. And again, we're not alone in the no revenue. I mean, if you look at some of the tourism sectors, a lot of them are really, really suffering. But there is an awareness of those industries that are under the tourism umbrella and how to sort of reboot slowly and meanwhile, like keeping them on life support to a certain extent. But Andrew, I just wanted to respond to your comment about like there being no question in my, like every live music venue I know who's attempting to use their space to produce some innovative project is doing everything they can. And I think it's early days for public health too, to sort of explain like what's okay and what isn't. We're in the process of submitting a reopening document to the province with kind of high level guidelines for venues that they would then customize with the hopes that public health will start to understand our industry even better, so that before you get that call, they've got this like a reopening guide for live music venues. Okay, here's what the industry says is best practice or standard. So let's hold this up to what the Toucan's doing. Let's have a conversation with the Toucan and see where we need to finesse to make sure that everyone is comfortable. And yeah, I mean, I think everyone's doing the very best they can in this wild, wild West. It is particularly, the inconsistencies not in live music, but elsewhere are rampant. So it's up to us to sort of get on the same page and work together.
We've spoken a good deal about the perspective from venues and the perspective of musicians. We haven't spoken too much about the average music listener and the average customer, essentially. Given not everyone's necessarily going to be comfortable just yet, like going back to seeing shows, even when, things really start moving again. Until we get to that point, what are some things that your average music lover can do for their venues right now?
I would say, again, just to kind of keep an open mind to and a consideration of the difficult times it is, mostly, I would say, for musicians and performing artists and for the venues that stage them, just to be mindful of the fact, it's not how it was, and free music was, a thing that was accessible because, enough people are out and about that, like Andrew was saying, we can kind of make enough money off of the bars to kind of support the musicians, the sound techs, the bar staff and everyone in the venue. But at this point, there's not enough people out and about to do that. So, ideally, at least, kind of be paying maybe putting in a little contribution towards the musicians themselves would go a long way. Then we'd ideally be able to kind of keep things rolling. And just as long as people are aware and mindful of that, then I think that would really go a long way.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Andrew, I wanted to get your point of view with the announcement by the Ontario Premier that our province is clear to proceed into stage 3 of the province's recovery plan. What does that look like for you in the Toucan when the Premier says every corner of our province will be getting back to work? Is that true for venues like the Toucan? Kris just shared his perspective on that, but will you be back to business as usual come this Friday?
No, we're probably a bit nervous about it, to be honest. I mean, that's how he does it. He just springs upon you. You've got a few days. So all of a sudden we have to hire people. And it's funny, our sound man got hold of us 2 minutes after the announcement. Are we going to have bands this weekend? And I would love to, but no, certainly not. And I'm not sure what we can do in the future because of all the health restrictions and how many people we have in there. It's a bit of a little nightmare, to be honest. We're still, it's early days yet, Rob, to figure out how we're going to actually do it. But we if we can safely get a band in there, we will certainly do it. I can't see it soon, though.
Erin, I'm wondering if you have any advice for Ontario's venues who are allowed to enter stage 3, or maybe even for those in the Greater Toronto area who aren't yet allowed to enter stage 3. What kind of advice do you give them as we sort of head towards recovery?
Proceed with caution, extreme caution. Don't take chances. And honestly, I mean, it's not like I expect any of them will. I mean, hearing Andrew just fills me with so much hope. I'm so glad that it's hard to know where people are at. Like if they're chomping at the bit, they're just like, okay, like I'm done with this. Let's just get back to business. But so as I mentioned, the Canadian Live Music Association will have a reopening recommendations document, and we're hoping that the province will use it with public health. And what we really needed to do is get to public health so that when venues are thinking, they can coordinate, because they're all so different and they'll need to customize based on our suggestions. But I would just go slow. I think that the PPE piece is very real. Like very, very real. So how are we all going to pay for all this PPE? I mean, other industries have been struggling with that already, right? Like now there's plexiglass everywhere. Somebody's making it, somebody's selling it. We have the Canadian Live Music Association. We have a series of weekly calls, and upcoming is a PPE discussion, I think next week or 2 weeks, with experts from the PPE field who can tell us how to get it and how to use it properly and all of those things. So like just getting educated on what that looks like, and talking to your networks, especially in town, I think is really important that cities are working together. So the Kingston venues should be talking to each other. So there's consistency and raising ultimately that therefore consumer confidence. So that when you go out, everyone's having the same experience. And something I learned yesterday in a meeting with the province was that fans want to be shown. So if you can do is it safe to come to the Toucan? Like maybe it's a YouTube video or a video on your Facebook page where you're actually showing people what you're doing. And at first, I think the feeling was, well, look, if I'll just say Venue X, if Venue X has to work this hard to show us how clean they are, maybe they're not clean at all. But now the feeling is very clearly, the research demonstrates that fans and consumers want to know what they're walking into. They want to feel safe. And the way they're going to feel safe is if you show them what you're doing. So they have a chance to decide before they show up to see that in motion and to know what to expect. And I want to say something as a consumer. I went to an outlet mall, one of those big outdoor places, and every single store had a different protocol. And I have to say, and I'm probably more on the chilled scale than the freaked out scale. I was with my kids, and even my kids were like, whoa, like one store lets 3 people in at a time. One store, anybody goes in. One store you can try and close. Next store you can't. One store, hand sanitizer, yes, mask, no. Like this was before masks were mandatory. It just, that made me feel very afraid. I was like, nobody knows what they're doing.
I found the same. It was very difficult to get clear answers, and things are changing constantly. I thought it would be nice if, the health departments had a representative maybe that would go around and even, be available to ask questions, and you can get a real answer from someone in person. And maybe even they have some sort of system where they check things out and give you a kind of a gold star. You're doing all the right things. Here you go. And then that might be something comforting for public as well, to be able to know that, okay, the public health department has been through here. There's been a representative through. They've had a chance to ask all the questions they need. And then as far as the public goes, there's a bit of a safety rating that's been checked off. And I think that would go a long way, but that takes a certain amount of money and organization as well, just to have that kind of thing organized.
That's been raised, actually, Kris, and I think it's something that could maybe happen long term, but there's something we have to reconcile here, and that is that public health is walking the same road we're all walking, which is I don't think anybody has the rule book yet, and it's being written in real time, which is, so I think in the long run, I think you're probably right. And it's a great suggestion, like some sort of certification or seal of approval, right? But so one reason why we're submitting recommendations from the association to the province is because the province in the premier's statement on Monday asked for them. So if you think that you can do something and we need to know about it, and that is because public health is so overloaded and overwhelmed and doesn't have the nuance in every industry. How could they? That they're looking to industry to lead, and in particular to associations. And we're happy to do that, while at the same time talking amongst ourselves and reinforcing what needs to be a deep, deep, deep commitment to, and obviously, and I think we all agree here, to consumer safety, artist safety, and worker safety.
Erin, I know you got to go here. I just want one last question for you. It's interesting about all the work that you've been doing on behalf of the venues, festivals, the entire live music economy across Canada. You're a membership-driven association. I was wondering if you could explain, as a source of knowledge and education, certainly during COVID-19, you've been instrumental, the CLMA has been. But what are some of the overall benefits of membership that venue owners like, say, Andrew and Kris here are on the call can look to the CLMA to provide?
As I alluded to earlier, the live music industry in Canada, it has missed opportunities to get its shit together. And now we have no choice. And I'm sorry to put it bluntly. So we have the internal storytelling and external storytelling. Internally, we need to get together around the same table and decide who we are and what we want. Do we want to work together? What are our common goals? How can we achieve them? We might be competitors. We might not like each other. Most of us love each other. I like Andrew already. But this is a reality. And we've done this to ourselves. If we look at other subsectors in the music industry, from songwriters, music publishers, to independent labels, you name it, those associations have been around for 40, 50 years. They've written cultural policy in this country. There's a reason Phase 1 clients got their money quickly and relatively easily. And deservedly so, right? So the live music industry needs to be working together. We need to hear from each other. We need to stay united. Even if we disagree, there's lots of room for discussion and dialogue. And in fact, I wouldn't have it any other way. They'd need a different boss if it was like, it's this way or no way. I mean, we're all learning all the time, and this situation has created a great opportunity for that as well. And then the external storytelling part to government, to our economic size scope, what happens when there's a change or a shift in that, why what we do matters for artists, how we facilitate the touring and dissemination of content, Canadian content, how we develop the careers of artists, why the Toucan is, and again, I sort of picking on the Toucan and why the Toucan is so essential to the career development of artists. And of course, the Toucan, and along with maybe a small handful of clubs in this country, has an incredible story to tell. You take the Toucan out, do we have the Tragically Hip? I mean, do we really? These are stories that we need to tell. We need to entrench that reality. And I'll sort of try and close the loop on my thought here. Canadians have consumed more live music in the last 4 months than in the history of ever. If we can't, as average people in this country, stand up and say why live music matters today, then we haven't been paying attention to our own emotional and mental heartbeat. Live music has given us, many of us, reasons to get out of bed in the morning through this. It's inspired us, and I don't think it's going out on a limb to say it's saved us. So we need to keep that in mind when we're talking to government, and the Canadian Live Music Association is the voice of the industry, and working together, we need to come out of this stronger than ever, so that when we are faced with this again in the future, may we never be, but if we are, there is no question that live music is part of the cultural, economic, and social fabric of this country. We are a legitimate industry. We create jobs and we change lives. And that's why those working in the industry should be members, so that we can make sure that that message is clear and never, ever forgotten.
Amen. I think I need a tissue. Erin Benjamin, president of the Canadian Live Music Association. Let me try that again. Erin Benjamin, president of the Canadian Live Music Association. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight and your passion. We feel that enthusiasm here in Kingston especially, so we appreciate you joining us.
It's been a total pleasure. And to Kris and Andrew, thank you for everything that you're doing for your venues and for your city. And Kingston is one of the most important live music destinations in this country. And, I just want to thank all of you for doing what you can to pre-COVID and post-COVID, because we needed you then and we need you now. Thank you, everyone.
Kris, Andrew was sharing with us some of the things that the Toucan had been doing or trying to do with the live streaming during the pandemic. It was quite popular for the audience that the Toucan has created online. You have an initiative that you started at Musiikki as well. I don't want to butcher the name here, but I think it's pronounced Yabox. Am I right?
Yeah, we started. We had a little bit of troubles just with internet, and so we went a different route. And I was trying to figure out ways that we can do this alternatively again, just to kind of keep the bands getting something, and the musicians. Mind you, this kind of works towards people who have more recordings and such as well, but. So we started the Ya box, which is, Musiikki is finished for music and Ya is finished for share. So it's the share box, and it's the idea of it is that we can purchase music and art from some of the local artists and musicians, and people will be able to sign up for this mail out box, and they would get samples of this recordings, and we've offered to do recordings as well in our space if someone doesn't have an album or something, and and some of the band merch as well as some of our merch and things like that, and just kind of like a little loot bag of stuff mailed out every few months, and this helps to kind of put the music into people's hands and into people's ears, and also continue to provide some jobs for people, so that we have to organize this, we have to package this, and of course the artists and the musicians as well are getting music purchased from them to put into this mail out box.
Andrew, last question, I think. As we enter stage 3 of our COVID-19 recovery plan, what message do you have for some of the bands and artists locally here in Kingston who have played the Toucan or want to play the Toucan? What do you have to say to them in terms of setting their expectations on the future of one of the city's most cherished live music venues?
Well, the first thing I say is be patient, because we certainly don't know what's going to happen yet. So just a little patience, and it's not going to be the same for at least a year. And throughout these discussions, by the way, the first thing I'm thinking of is, man, it's hard to put on a punk show. People want to get off their seats and start slam dancing. So we haven't even talked about dancing and that kind of participation. And I can't see them allowing that. It's going to be like, what's the movie?
Footloose.
It's going to be like that for a while. No dancing or anything is going to be allowed. I can't see that. So yeah, to the bands, a little bit of patience, and we're going to do our best to have it organized, something safe where they can sit inside and watch the bands. But it's going to be a while yet, I think. It's going to be tough. And our priority at the pub right now is just keep the place safe for the customers. And unfortunately, the live music is not a priority right away. It's how we're going to enact all these stage 3 protocols. It's going to be tough. So a little bit of patience.
Well, Andrew Brown of the Toucan and Kris Clendining of Musiikki Café here in Kingston, really appreciate you guys spending some time with us. And who knows, maybe there'll be an opportunity to speak to you guys again.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for putting this on. And this was great.
We could regroup again in a few months or 6 months and see where things at. I suggest, Rob.
Actually, that would be a good idea. We should do another one in 6 months and see. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? By then we could be in another lockdown. Who knows? Yeah.
And that's why it's good to hear that you're taking all these extra precautions. It's a relief to hear. Yeah.
Well, we tried it. My God, all our hands are drying off all the sanitizer at the pub. it's nonstop. But you have to do whatever. It's all about making customers feel safe, right? Ultimately, it's your staff have to be safe. Customers have to feel safe if they're going to enter a venue.
Well, we'll be watching things closely.
I'll see you down the alleyways, Kris.
Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you there. We'll see you there soon.
Okay, brother. Cheers, man. Thanks, guys.
Okay, see you, Andrew.
All the best.
Bye, guys.
This has been Kingston Live. We encourage you to rate us on your listening platform of choice and subscribe where possible. Kingston Live is a member of the Canadian Live Music Association and was recorded in Kingston at Titan Sound. Writing and research by Peter Sanfilippo. Voiceover and technical direction by John Sanfilippo. Executive producer Rob Howard. Special thanks to Jackson Coulter and Reed Cunningham. Opinions expressed by Kingston Live guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the opinions of Kingston Live hosts and staff. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@kingstonlive.ca.